right, well, good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for the warm welcome. I am thrilled to be here, I have to say, for so many reasons. One of them actually is, I have to admit, my first book. I'm a co-author of the book. It's called Design for Digital. It's coming out next week, and I get to talk about some of the content here today. So I am thrilled, as you can understand. But I'm actually even more thrilled by the theme of this conference here. Designing enterprises for better futures. That is really cool. And together with my colleagues at MIT, I've been studying over 200, what we call lovingly, I would say, big old companies, and how they redesign themselves to create better futures. Now, I have to admit that most of the time, they wanted to create better futures for themselves, for the companies themselves. But the most exciting examples, and I think also for the employees in those companies, the most motivating examples were the ones where the company was trying to create a better future beyond their own borders, so for society at large. And I would like to share an example with you that illustrates that. And I want to highlight the role of what we call digital business design in that. All right, we are in a fantastic place, right? I mean, Lisbon is a wonderful city, and the Academy of Sciences is in a gorgeous building, I have to say. And yet, I want to take you to a different place. I want to take you here, see whether this works. Why do they all not work today? Oh, there we go. Who of you has been to this place? Give me a show of hands. Okay, few of you, some of you thinking, well, tell me where is this? I can probably answer. It's hard to read, actually. It's in the shadow there. It says Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. This is the signature building of MIT. It's the MIT Dome. But MIT is very quantitative oriented. So instead of referring to buildings by a name, we prefer referring to them by a number. So this is building 10. This is how we know it, Building 10. And if you want to get into Building 10 from one of the main streets through Cambridge, Massachusetts, you have to go through Building 7. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to count all the other building numbers. It's going to be pretty boring. You have to go through Building 7. And Building 7 is a huge building. It's as tall as this one here, almost, I'd say. So you feel really small there. And I recently went there again. I took a photo. And this one here is the photo. As soon as it works. These clickers today aren't what they used to be. There we go. This is the photo. And I took it because I thought, man, what a great fit to the theme of this conference. I don't know whether you can read it. It says there, innovation for a better world. It says that there. And I want to talk about, I'm going to stand there. I want to talk about digital innovation for a better world. Now, I don't know about you, but when I talk especially to business people, about digital transformation, digital innovation, I still get this question about, well, what is really new about digital, right? I mean, we've been using IT systems for decades, so now we all call this digital, so nothing's new, right? And I totally disagree, right? There is something really new, but it is not about any specific technology, actually. Sure, we do have cool machine learning algorithms, and we do have blockchain, and we do have the Internet of Things, and so on and so forth, and that is truly exciting, but it's not what makes the difference. What makes the difference is that these technologies, actually the capabilities of these technologies, are now enabling companies to move beyond supporting business processes, which is super important, but it allows them to actually push technologies into their products and services for more and more companies. So they actually become software companies or have to become digital companies to some degree. And it allows them to create new value propositions that certainly are focusing on benefiting their customers and then the company, but hopefully also benefiting society beyond customers. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to give you an example that illustrates this, and I would also like to use this example to illustrate that if you want to digitally innovate for better futures, that requires digital design for better futures. And I want to talk about a company that is attempting that, or has attempted that, but it's in the middle of it. So no company, I guess, would ever claim, yes, we've completed that journey. It's still very early days, but anyway, I want to share that example with you because it excites me. Let's check with you. I want to talk about a company that is the most valuable brand in the Netherlands. And I'm sure that if I talk about the most valuable brand of the Netherlands and we talk about creating better futures, you all think of beer and Heineken, right? But it's not Heineken. That company, actually, the most valuable brand of the Netherlands is Royal Philips, okay? Royal Philips is a company that has innovation in its slogan. It's innovation and you. But I would actually say they also have innovation in their DNA to some degree. Who of you has a product from Philips? Okay, a few of you. I shave my head with a Philips shaver. It's exactly what you wanted to know, right? Well, anyway, Philips is the leader actually in patents and patent filing in Europe, especially when it comes to medical technology. And they are also going through a huge transformation. Anyone from Philips, by the way, here? Right, no, well, okay, I'm learning something new. So they are going through a huge transformation. They used to be a technology conglomerate, right? Selling everything from light bulbs to X-ray machines to TV screens. And they massively simplified recently, actually. They are now focusing on health technology. They call that health tech. They are becoming a health tech company. They separated a lot of the businesses. For example, the lighting business, they separated. It's called Signify. Now it's a separate company. They're focusing on health technology. Their goal is to improve 3 billion people's lives by, actually they changed this to 2030 because they separated so many companies. And their purpose is to improve healthcare outcomes at lower cost. So talking about creating better futures, a lot of that will have to take place, or hopefully is going to take place in healthcare. And Philips is trying to address this with their purpose. I'm going to talk about how they're actually planning to do this. Now, they see a big role, well, they are biased, of course, but they see a big role in technology that it actually plays in fulfilling that purpose, that mission that they have. Let's take a look at the role that they have. Here is a quote from one of their executive board members. This is Carla Krivet, and she, first of all, highlights that why this is actually important and why we need to create better futures in healthcare, saying, well, the healthcare costs are rising, right? So if you go to the US, 18% roundabout of the GDP are healthcare expenses, right? That is crazy. In many Western societies, actually, it is above 10% as well. So that is a problem. Populations are aging, and still, although we spend more and more in healthcare, it is more people actually dying of chronic diseases, whether they are related to heart issues or respiratory or breathing issues or diabetes or whatever. So there's clearly a gap, right? And Philips highlights that technology plays a really important role, digital technology especially. Carla puts it that way, technology is our only hope we have to bridge this gap. So it's pretty clear that they put an emphasis on technology here to improve healthcare outcomes at lower cost. So let's take a look at one example of how they're actually trying to do this. Let's imagine the following, okay? You haven't been sleeping well recently, and it hasn't been because you were so excited about INTERSECTION19, all right? In fact, you were waking up multiple times a week, multiple times during the night, and because you haven't been sleeping well, your day is miserable, right? You don't get the sleep, you're not as active and energized, and so you want to find a remedy, and you go to see a medical doctor, and she might diagnose you. I know, let's not hope that is the case, let's just imagine. She might diagnose you with sleep apnea. That is a sleeping disorder, right? And it is related to not being able to breathe when you're sleeping, not being able to breathe well when you're sleeping. And so the doctor might actually prescribe you a CPAP device. You see one here on the photo. It's a continuous positive airway pressure device. So it's basically a mask that you're wearing, connected via a hose to a machine, and it keeps pushing air into your lungs, right? So you can breathe better. And so that's it, right? Problem solved. You'll sleep better. But here's the issue. You went to the doctor, you got a prescription, you bought the CPAP device, you get reimbursement from your health insurance, then you go home, you put this device on your nightstand, and you attach the mask at night, and you're not going to sleep better, right? And that is related to the fact that you are wearing a big mask in your face right now. You have a hose that is kind of stopping you from moving as flexible as you were used to. And there's a machine on your nightstand that makes weird noises that you're not used to. So it's not really a surprise, right? So that's going to be, the second day is not going to be any different, right? So actually, a pretty large percentage of people stop treatment and just drop out here. And you see basically the CPAP device going from the nightstand into the drawer, and it's never seen again. And that is the exact opposite of what Philips is trying to achieve, right? The exact opposite of their purpose. We just increased healthcare cost, right? Because there was a reimbursement, and we didn't have any effect because we're not sleeping better. And so the question is, what do they have to do? Here's a quote from Philips, Royal Philips CEO Frans van Houten, who says, well, continuing to only focus on separate products, here is a cool CPAP device, an MRI scanner, a CT scanner, whatever, isn't going to fix the problem for the customer. And quite frankly, it's not going to fix the problem of societies with increasing healthcare costs either, right? So he says, well, this is why it's not about how much better you make the product, it's about how much better you make the system. So he says we take this solutions-based approach. Philips is really trying, and this is really audacious, I'd say. They're trying to reinvent how healthcare is being conducted. Now, not alone, but it doesn't make the goal any less big. They're trying to reinvent how healthcare is being conducted, and their vehicle to do this is what they call integrated solutions powered by digital technology, so health tech solutions, they would say. We would call them digital offerings. So technology moving into their products and services. But beyond just having it in a CPAP device. So, of course, what is Royal Philips doing? Now, one thing they are doing is they are improving the CPAP devices, right? So one thing that patients did mention is that even after they put on this mask and they have it sitting kind of comfortably, they want to be able to kiss their partner goodnight, right? So that's impossible with this mask. So, of course, they keep changing the mask. But then it's not going to solve that problem, right? So what they're doing is they are connecting this product, the CPAP device, to their cloud, and they're exchanging data with a number of stakeholders here. So, for example, with the medical doctor, and the data is about how you use it, about your sleep, actually. And so they share it with the medical doctor, who can see your state, whether you're using it, and can, like a coach, can nudge you, right? As if, imagine you want to run a marathon, you get a sports coach, and if you one day don't feel like running really, I hope that that coach is going to nudge you and say like, hey, keep going. But that is not how healthcare is being conducted right now, right? It's not that the medical doctor is checking this. It's very transactional. So in this case, it would be great if they just say, well, indeed, I see you have stopped using it. This takes 2 weeks, right? And I can already see in your data that you are improving, keep going, don't stop now. And that might help. What they're also sharing the data with is the healthcare insurance. So they can tie reimbursement to use, which is scary on one hand, but on the other hand, it's creating an incentive. And sometimes, actually, it is that incentive that helps people to keep going. Many of us are very incentive-driven. So that is just one example of how Philips is moving away from kind of focusing their digital innovation or any innovation on products towards innovation on integrated solutions, right, that try to address a certain problem there. The question, of course, is, so what does this take, right, Philips to do? What does it take Philips to do that? And in one word, it takes them a transformation. It's a huge change there. Frans van Houten says, we had to change the way we worked, roles and responsibilities changed. We had to change our whole behavior and the culture in our company. We had to work together much more in cross-functional teams. We had to work together with the customer much more and with other stakeholders much more. We call this, what Philips is undergoing, we call this digital business design. This is our definition of digital business design. It's the holistic organizational configuration of people, process, and technology. But for what? Right, so why is this digital business design? Well, in order to be able to create new value propositions that are delivered via digital offerings like the solutions we've seen that are inspired by the capabilities of digital technology. That's what I talked about in the beginning. Technology allows you to create new value propositions, but if you really want to do that, you need to redesign. If you're a big old company, right, and you actually did something different before. We identified 5 capabilities which come in the form, we call them building blocks. 5 building blocks that all the big old companies that we studied are working on to various degrees, that they're working on in order to be able to offer these new value propositions and new digital offerings. And I want to just talk through those 5 and give you examples of some challenges and what companies actually are doing there. I'm going to use Philips, but I'm also going to use some other companies actually to refer to that one. I am going to talk about these 5 building blocks or 5 capabilities from the perspective of actually 5 questions that every company, big old company at least, has to find answers to. And the first question is, do you know what your customers value when it comes to digital? Do you know what your customers are willing to pay for when it comes to digital? And the answer for most big old companies, not surprisingly to you, is no. Right? I mean, big old companies had decades to learn about what their customers really love about their traditional products and services, right? So take whatever, Porsche. I'm from Germany, so I have to talk about cars. So take Porsche, for example. They had quite a number of years to find out what makes a great sports car. And I guess, well, they're getting there. And they would say that differently, but anyway, they're getting there. But that's just not the case for digital when it comes to digital, right? They don't know. And so big old companies need to create what we call customer insight. They need to learn about what their customers want and desire and are willing to pay for as well. So, and one way that companies do this is through lots of experiments with lots of iterations together with the customer. And to give you one example of how Philips is doing this, probably let's start with how they came up with the idea that we probably have to understand our customers better. One product that they designed, right, in the vein of being a very proud product designer, they came up with a product that they thought, man, this fits perfect to our purpose of improving healthcare outcomes at lower cost. And the product consisted of a number of sensors that you could wear and use, and the data would be collected so you could remotely monitor patients, right? They designed this and said, well, this is going to be great because then we can send patients home earlier, right? Some of them at least. For example, after surgery, they don't have to stay in the hospital, so we can send them home earlier, knowing that many people recover faster when they're in a familiar environment. So awesome, right? So better healthcare outcomes at lower cost. Let's do this, right? And so they developed the product, they started pilots, and then all the pilots petered out, right? So no one ordered this product, no hospital, and well, why? Well, Philips had just invented a wonderful way to decrease their customers' revenues, right? Because if you're a hospital, one way you get revenues is by having beds filled with patients, right? And so now you're sending them home earlier. And I love this example because it shows that, well, everyone, if you just ask them, everyone would kind of violently agree that it's a great idea to create better futures by kind of improving healthcare outcomes at lower cost by, for example, sending patients home earlier because they really don't have to be in this bed anymore and occupy it. But sometimes not everyone is incentivized actually to do this, right? And so Philips had to learn this, and what they did, they created a methodology which borrows heavily from design thinking and the agile mindset. They call it Health Suite Labs. And they gather lots of people actually together. So from hospitals, representatives. These would be the CEO of a hospital, for example. This would be medical doctors, nurses, but also patients. Then people from insurance companies, health insurance companies, and policymakers, to do two things, basically, through a number of workshops. One thing is to find out what is the problem we're actually trying to solve, and the second one is, well, how could we approach solving the problem here? And there are many, many people from Philips in there as well, like experts, but they're all not allowed to sell. You're forbidden to sell anything there. I mean, the hope, of course, is, right, let's make no excuse, is that Philips is hoping that they will be part of designing that solution later on, right, and provisioning it. But what they definitely get is they get a lot of insight into the pain points of their customers and what needs to change in order to fulfill their mission there. So that's why I love this example there. So companies, big old companies at least, need to create this customer insight and a lot of experimentation. Now, we talked about a lot of experimentation. The nature of experimentation is that a lot of experiments fail, right? And because a lot of them fail, you don't want to take a long time, right, to develop them. You don't want to take 2 years only then to find out, that didn't work. So you want to go really fast, right? But the problem of going really fast is that it's also easy to create a mess. And big old companies, all the big old companies, people from big old companies in this room kind of know this, and they are super good at this, kind of creating complexity. That's my favorite term, by the way. Complexity, creating lots of complexity. Royal Philips, for example, in 2011 had more than 10,000 systems. Which company, any company in this room that can top this? More than 10,000? We don't know, we stopped counting at 9,500, okay. So, man, more than 10,000 systems. And these were mostly systems that support processes, right? And now, we're about to do the same thing again with all the digital systems that are actually supporting the products and services. So, I can assure you, having hundreds of incompatible, non-integrated systems isn't going to create great customer experiences. So Philips' approach to this is they're creating digital platforms, like many of those companies, that are different from the platforms that they already had in place, right? So they had platforms that supported their processes, like idea to market, market to order, order to cash, whatever, SAP systems, CRM systems, should say Salesforce then, I guess, product lifecycle management systems, and so on and so forth. They had this, and they call that the Philips integrated landscape. But that's about processes, and that's about, for them, it's about operational excellence. There's lots of innovation going on there, but it's about operational excellence mostly. And what we're talking about here with the digital platform, that is about digital offerings, right? And that is about rapid innovation with digital offerings. So it's two very different platforms for two very different purposes, actually, that they're developing. Now, we talked about creating better futures, right? And creating better futures, most of the time is very difficult to create all by yourself. So one of the questions is, will you be able to build everything, all these solutions, all these offerings, will you be able to build them all by yourself? That sounds like another rhetorical question, great. But actually, if you think about Apple, when they came up first with their iPhone, the answer for them was, yes, sure, we want to build it all ourselves. There was no App Store. All of the apps on the first iPhone were provisioned by Apple. Right? And it's only later someone convinced Steve Jobs that would be a great idea to open up their digital platform, in their case it was iOS, right, and allow third-party developers, like Microsoft or Facebook, later on, to develop apps and complement Apple's digital offering, the iPhone, with other components, right, with other offerings. And the question is, so do you want to do that as well if you're a big old company? Do you want to, because you have digital offerings at some point, you have a digital platform, so do you want to open that up, for example, via APIs, to third parties so that they can complement your digital offering and using your digital platform? And Philips says, well, we won't be able to actually do all of this ourselves, so they are opening up their digital platform, which is called Health Suite Digital Platform, actually. And if you go to hsdp.io, You can sign up as a developer and develop whatever, a HIPAA-compliant app that uses their analytics algorithm that Philips is providing. Now this is, of course, much more than just, hey, let's just create APIs, right? It's much more than a technological challenge. You are creating actually a new business here, right? So Philips is, all of a sudden has a new product that they never had before, that is a digital platform. The digital platform now is their product that they're selling to a customer they never had before, namely developers. So OMFG, this is a huge change for them, right? We also talked about technological complexity, right? Earlier this morning, and I just talked about it again, 10,000 systems. And now, big old companies, though, don't only have technological legacy, they also have grown organizational structures, right? And so we're going to talk about that as well. The question is, who in your company is actually going to be responsible for building these digital offerings, for the digital platform, for all these components that they consist of? Who's going to do that? Are you going to do that within your existing organization, your existing governance, with your existing processes, or are you going to do this separately? Now, many car manufacturers that we studied, Audi, for example, Toyota, they do this separately. Toyota has Toyota Connected, Audi has Audi Business Innovation, Porsche has Porsche Digital, and they are actually taking care of some of these, for example, sharing economy-based business models that they're experimenting with, right? And by the way, also experimenting with new ways of working and organizing. For Philips, it didn't go as well when they tried to do that separately, right? Having their new digital integrated solutions have a separate team for them and then a separate team for the traditional products, because they weren't talking to the same customer, because for integrated solutions they were talking more to the CEOs of hospitals, for example, and the existing products teams were talking to, for example, the head of the radiology department. But it's still the same company, and it gets really confusing actually for the company. It gets also really confusing among the teams actually. What did you discuss there? So they had to actually experiment and change that. And that is an example that experimentation actually is not only necessary for these offerings, what are our customers willing to pay for, but experimentation is also necessary to find out what is the best way I'm actually going to run this inside my organization. And again, there, I haven't seen the best example. Like, this is how to do it, so let's follow this playbook. It's just not there. So there's lots of experimentation. That is scary, actually. Talking about, oh, this might not work, but why don't we send everyone in that direction? Man, that scares a lot of people there. It changes the role of management to a degree, actually quite significantly. The old command and control structure, I am going to make all decisions, is not going to work for this. We see a lot of companies trying to have more autonomous teams that make the decisions and not kind of do all the groundwork and then ask the manager, let us repeat everything we just did and experienced, and then you make the decision. That is just way too slow. So lots of autonomous teams, but they can't just do anything, right? They have to be aligned at the same time, autonomous, but also aligned to the purpose, right? Coming back to the purpose of the company. And I want to share a different story of a different company to talk about this alignment. How do you align operational decisions to your purpose? How do you make sure that kind of people running around in your company, and you have 50,000 of them, and they are kind of, you let them do what they want, but it's not really, right? So you want them to go into a certain direction. And I want to talk about a company that has the highest Net Promoter Score across all industries in the US, that has customers that love them, they really love them, and that has way higher profits than the industry average. What do you think? Which company fits that description? Salesforce? All right, are you from Salesforce? Okay, just checking. Okay, Salesforce, any other guesses? Say again? Zappos, okay, yeah. Awesome, yeah. Any others? The Queen? The Queen, awesome. The Queen makes, oh, okay. I'm talking about a financial service organization. Talking about a financial service organization. Did you just say the name? There we go. Well, they're actually still doing pretty well. Well, they're still doing pretty well. I'm talking about USAA. Who of you has heard about USAA? You have, of course. 3 people. Any customers of USAA here? USAA. USAA. You're a customer? What do you think? And?
It's the only credit card I have, so it's the only thing I know.
Okay. So someone in your family was in the military. Your father was in the military. So they are focusing on members of the military and their families, right? And they did something similar to what Philips did. They moved from selling products. Now, in their case, it's financial services, right? So it's less kind of fascinating products, but it's bank accounts and it's loans, right? So you want to buy a car, it's a car loan, P&C insurance, property and casualty insurance. So car insurance, for example, life insurance, all this kind of stuff, right? And they moved from selling that, they still sell that, but they take a focus of life events now. They actually call it experiences now. Life events are things like buying a car, getting married, getting divorced, buying a house, having kids. Not in that sequence, but anyway, you get the point. So these are life events, right? And life events involve a number of products and much more. For example, advice, like which car to buy. But it takes some integration, right? If you help someone to buy a car, very different than just, hey, here's a car insurance. So that is what they're trying to address there. And just like in the Philips example, right, where we had everyone actually wants to do the right thing, but then they're not incentivized to do it, that same thing happened with USAA internally. Because everyone at USAA, they have different business units, right, like banking, property and casualty insurance, life insurance, and so on and so forth. They all said, yeah, integration, that is great, because we need to create better customer experience. They call their customers members. So better member experience, we need to do that. Why don't we talk about that when I met my P&L goal? Which is at the end of the year, so never ever someone talks about integration. It just doesn't happen, right? And so what USAA did is they just forced them to talk about integration, to discuss about integration, about integrated customer experiences, by breaking the relationship between, on the one hand, the product units, the business units, and on the other hand, the customer. They broke the relationship by inserting a new unit in between called member experience. They moved 12,000 people, that was half the company, into that unit, and that unit is responsible for, well, exactly that, customer experience across all products, across all channels. The business units remain responsible for P&L though. And so you can imagine at some point you come to these meaty discussions, right, about, well, what should we do? I would like to invest into a new cool car insurance. You can all, in your head, when I say cool car insurance, it's clear what that means. There's a new cool car insurance with a great new feature, and the guys in member experience say, you know what, we would like to introduce a new life event and integrate existing products better. And so you have this clash, right? In most companies I know, the person who owns P&L wins that argument. You have a great business case, you win that argument. So what USAA did is they changed what makes a valid argument in the company. They changed what makes a valid argument in the company. So you still have to come up with a positive business case. That is your right to play, right? So they are they are member owned, but they are still a for-profit company. So you have to have a positive business case, your entry ticket, but then they don't decide on what's the best business case here. They ask everyone to assess how much is their mission impacted by each of their investments. And their mission is to facilitate the financial security of our members. So again, talking about better futures, financial security is going to be part of that. So facilitate the financial security of our members. And so you have to assess, if you come up with a cool new car insurance, you have to assess how many members would be affected by that new feature and to what degree. And if you say, well, but I want to come up with a new life event that is about buying a house, how many people would be affected and in which way, right? So it's an estimate for sure, just like it is when you come up with a financial business case, right? So they have to do this. So we keep talking about behavioral change and cultural change, and I would say, boom, right? This is it. If you change the way you can argue, you can discuss what makes a valid argument in your company, then you're getting pretty close to that, right? Every company has a mission. go to their website, you'll find a mission. They have a purpose. But I would submit that what makes a great purpose, a great mission, only internally looking, not externally looking, they're super great missions. What makes a great mission, if you look at them, or a useful mission inside, is whether you can use it to influence operational decision making, actually. And that's what they created. And so that is about changing accountability and how we do things around here to move from products to integrated solutions. Talking about operational decisions, the last question here, the last building block we call the operational backbone. Well, the question here is, do you have reliable operational processes and systems to support your new business models that come with digital offerings? Now, many big old companies by now have systems, although they are always too complex for our tastes, but they are supporting kind of okay-ish, hopefully, the existing business models for the existing products and services. But that's not necessarily the case with these new business models that are introduced. So I want to talk a lot about this here. There are full books about this, about any of these topics, actually. But with this one, it's really tough because our kind of gut feel is always like, we need to re-architect our operational systems and processes. And that is a multi-year effort, though. And for example, BASF is doing that right now, 7-year project. Biggest project in company's history, goes on until 2025. You cannot wait so long to kind of do digital innovation as I talked about it. So either you're doing two transformations, two different transformations in parallel. One we call a digitization transformation, which is about digitizing your processes, operational excellence. And the other one is a digital transformation, which is about rapid innovation in your digital offerings and new value propositions. Or you say, you know what, we can't wait that long. Two transformations sounds crazy. One is already kind of insane. So we need to get to good enough as soon as possible. That takes lots of workarounds and it makes all of our hearts ache, right? And Philips had that problem that they couldn't support pay-per-use business models, for example, subscription models, and they had to find a workaround which they're not happy with. But they said, you know what, we don't have the time. We have to do this now. And well, anyway, so these are, there you go, 5 building blocks representing 5 capabilities that we see big old companies working on if they want to create new value propositions that are inspired by digital technology to really create new value propositions there. If you have, by the way, great examples of big old companies that are using digital technology, digital innovation to create better futures, I would love to learn about them because we would like to study them, what they're actually doing there. I totally agree with Meg McCarthy here, especially with her assessment of this being a very insightful and well-researched book. But I actually mean the first sentence there is that not all companies are born digital, right? But all of them must offer customers new digital value proposition or risk disruption from those who will. And we see this over and over again, that startups, new entrants are actually disrupting the industries. I would go a step further and say like, well, it's exactly what I just said, is companies that want to change that, they actually need to change their industry. Going back to the Philips example, they need to change how healthcare is being conducted. Otherwise, they cannot fulfill their mission, really. They cannot do this all on your own. And this is not going to happen by chance. This actually requires some purposeful, thoughtful, well, reconfiguration of people, process, and technology. In our words, it requires redesign of the entire business. Now, given this ever-increasing importance of what we all knew already for the whole time, of disciplines like design and architecture, it is about time, right? And we keep saying that as well, but now it's really about time that senior executives take on that role. And the most intriguing example I came across is Royal Philips. I would call Frans van Houten and his executive committee the chief organizational architects, really, of this company. And I think if your role is architect or designer, it's part of your job, I guess, to make senior executives enthusiastic about this and to educate them, and that is super challenging, but it's also a lot of fun because, hey, at the end, what you're enabling them to do is to redesign themselves to create better futures for all of us, and how cool is that? So with that, I wish you tons of fun and insight during the rest of the conference. Thanks so much for having me. Okay.